metal chair was cold under my wrists, and the light above me buzzed like it was about to die. I did not know how long I had been sitting there. Long enough for the feeling in my fingers to fade, long enough to hear my own heartbeat in my ears. 3 of them stood around me. Tall, gray-skinned, eyes like polished stones. Their leader had a voice that came out low and slow, every word measured, like he was choosing each one carefully so it would land the hardest. My name is Ethan Hall. 6 hours ago, I was a supply technician on a research outpost near the edge of a quiet star system. Now I was strapped to a chair on a ship that did not belong to my people, surrounded by beings who thought I was something I was not. The outpost had been hit fast, no warning. One moment I was checking inventory in the storage bay, the next the walls were shaking and alarms were screaming through the corridors. I remember running. I remember a door sealing behind me half a second too late, catching my sleeve and tearing it. I remember falling down a maintenance shaft and landing hard on a platform 2 levels below. Then hands grabbed me, and the world went dark. When I woke up, I was here. The leader crouched in front of me and studied my face, the way someone studies a puzzle they cannot solve. His name, I would later learn, was Vantor. He reached out and pulled my sleeve up without asking, exposing my forearm to the harsh light. He went still. "Explain this," he said. I looked down. There it was. The long pale line running from my wrist almost to my elbow, and next to it, a cluster of small round marks, and above that, a faded patch of skin slightly lighter than the rest. "Explain what?" I said, my voice rougher than I wanted it to sound. "These marks, there are more, on your neck, your shoulder, your leg." He turned to the other 2, who were watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "This one has survived more violence than any specimen we have taken. Look at him. He is a soldier, a weapon shaped like a man." I almost laughed, but laughing felt like a dangerous thing to do in that chair, so I held it back. "You are wrong," I said. Vantor tilted his head. "We do not make mistakes about this. We have studied hundreds of species across 100 worlds. Scar patterns tell a story. Layered wounds, old and new, healed and reopened. This is the body of someone who has fought and refused to stop fighting. Tell us what unit you served. Tell us what weapons did this to you. Tell us how many battles carved these lines into your skin, and we may consider mercy." The room was silent except for the hum of the ship's engine somewhere far below us. I felt the cold metal against my back, felt the restraints digging into my wrists, and understood something important in that moment. They were afraid of me. Not because of anything I had done, but because of what my skin looked like. And fear, in a room like this, could go one of 2 ways. It could make them cautious, or it could make them decide it was safer to end the threat before it grew. I needed to choose my next words very carefully. "You want the truth," I said, "the real truth, not the story you have already decided to believe." Vantor's stone eyes narrowed. "Truth is what we require." "Fine." I took a breath. "Untie one of my hands and I will show you exactly what each one of these marks means. Every single one. And when I am done, you are going to feel very foolish for pointing a weapon at a man because of a scraped knee." One of the other 2, a younger-looking alien with sharper features, made a sound that might have been a scoff. "He mocks us." "I am not mocking you," I said, keeping my voice level even though my pulse was hammering. "I am telling you that you have made a mistake, and mistakes in a room like this can get people killed. I would rather explain than have that happen, wouldn't you?" Vantor studied me for a long moment. Then he reached down and released the restraint on my right hand. I flexed my fingers slowly, feeling the blood rush back into them, and pointed to the long pale line on my forearm, the first one he had noticed. "This is from a bicycle," I said. The 3 of them exchanged a look I could not read. "A vehicle," Vantor said slowly. "This is a wound from a vehicle collision, a battle involving machinery. It is a wound from being 9 years old and riding too fast down a hill near my house," I said. There was a patch of loose gravel at the bottom. I did not see it in time. I went over the front of the bicycle and landed on my arm on the pavement. My mother had to pick gravel out of the cut for 20 minutes with tweezers while I cried in the kitchen. That is the whole story. No enemy, no unit, no weapon, just a hill, a bicycle, and bad judgment. The younger alien tilted his head, confused. "You were a child when this happened." "I was. And your people allowed a child to operate a vehicle capable of causing such injury, unsupervised." "We did not have much of a choice," I said. "Children on my planet are curious, and they do not always listen to warnings, no matter how many times you give them. I was told to slow down on that hill at least a dozen times before it happened. I did not listen. That is not a battle wound, Vantor. That is a lesson." He was quiet, processing that. I moved on before he could ask another question. because momentum mattered here. I needed them thinking about the story, not about whether they still wanted to hurt me. I turned my arm and pointed to the small round marks near my elbow. These came from something called chickenpox, I said. It is an illness, not a wound at all, not in the way you mean. Almost every child on my planet gets it. It covers your skin in small itchy spots. You are told again and again not to scratch them, because if you do, they leave marks like this. I did not listen to that warning either. I was 6 years old and the itching was unbearable, and I scratched anyway, and now I carry the proof of my own impatience on my arm for the rest of my life. Vantor's expression shifted, just slightly, into something that looked almost like disbelief mixed with something softer underneath it. This mark is from a disease, not a fight. Not a fight. Just childhood. I reached up and pulled my collar aside to show the thin, faded line running along my collarbone. This one is a good story, I said. I was 10. My little sister wanted a sandwich and our parents were not home. I decided I was old enough to use the stove by myself. I was not. The pan slipped while I was lifting it and the edge caught me here. I have never once, not one single time in my entire life, used a kitchen without something going wrong. I have burned toast so badly it set off an alarm. I have dropped a full pot of boiling water an inch from my own foot. Kitchens, to me, are more dangerous than anything else I have ever faced, including this chair I am currently sitting in. The sharp-featured alien let out a short breath through his nose that might have been amusement, quickly hidden. Vantor was watching my face now instead of my arm, as if trying to read whether I was telling the truth by studying my expression instead of my skin. You claim your species survives to adulthood despite constant, repeated, self-inflicted injury during youth. Every single one of us, I said. It is not unique to me. Ask any human you ever meet to show you their arms and their knees, and I promise you will hear 10 stories just as ordinary as mine. A broken arm from a tree. A scar from a dog that did not want a bath. A burn from a birthday candle held too long. This is not the record of a soldier. This is the record of a species that falls down constantly and gets back up anyway, because we never really learn to be careful. Not fully. Not ever. There was a pause. The engine hummed beneath us. One of the guards near the door shifted his weight, and for a moment, I thought the tension in the room might snap into something worse. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I kept talking, because silence felt like the more dangerous option. I turned my leg slightly so the mark on my knee was visible through the tear in my pants. I got this falling off a roof, I said. I was 11. My grandmother had a shed behind her house, and I decided the roof looked like a good place to practice tricks on a board with wheels. It was not a good place. There was a metal gutter at the edge, and I did not see it until it was already tearing into my skin on the way down. I broke nothing, which still surprises me to this day, but the cut needed stitches, and the scar has never fully faded. You climbed onto a structure knowing the risk of falling, the young one said, still trying to understand. I did not think about the risk at all, I said. That is the truth of being young. You do not calculate danger the way you should. You see a roof and a board with wheels and you think about how fun it will be, and the fear only arrives after you are already falling. That is true of almost every scar on my body. Fear came second. Curiosity always came first. Vantor crouched lower, level with my eyes now, and something in his posture had changed. The tightness in his shoulders had eased slightly. He was no longer looking at a captured enemy. He was looking at something closer to a puzzle finally starting to make sense. There is a mark on your neck, he said. Small, curved. I touched it with my free hand. A door, I said. A glass door at a party when I was 13. I was looking backward at a friend instead of where I was walking, and I ran straight into it. It was very clean glass. I want that on the record. Nobody could see it was there. I was not the only person that night who walked into it, but I was the only one who needed a bandage. For the first time since I had woken up in that chair, the younger alien made a sound that was unmistakably a laugh, quickly stifled behind a raised hand, as if laughing were not allowed in this room and he had broken a rule by accident. Vantor did not laugh, but something around his stone-colored eyes had softened. You are telling us, he said slowly, that every mark on your body, every single one we identified as a battle wound, came from ordinary living, illness, carelessness, curiosity, falling, nothing that resembles combat. That is exactly what I am telling you, I said. I have never fired a weapon at another living creature in my entire life. I loaded crates in a storage bay. I checked inventory lists. I fixed broken equipment when I had time. That is the whole of my service record. I am not a soldier, Vantor. I have never been trained to fight anyone. My body simply carries the marks of every mistake I have made since I was old enough to walk, and there have been a great many mistakes. Vantor stood up slowly and turned away from me. walking toward the small window at the far side of the room, looking out at the stars beyond. The younger alien and the guard by the door exchanged a glance I still could not fully read, but the sharp edges of fear that had filled the room earlier had softened into something closer to confusion. "We were told your species fights constant wars," Vantor said, still facing the window. "That your history is filled with conflict. That your bodies are built for endurance because your world demanded it of you through violence." "My world has had conflict," I admitted, "because lying about that would only make the truth harder to believe later. I will not pretend otherwise. But most of us live our entire lives without ever touching a weapon meant for another person. The marks you saw on me are not proof of war. They are proof of something much simpler. We are careless. We are curious. We climb things we should not climb, and we run when we should walk, and we touch stoves we are told not to touch, and somehow, through all of that, we keep surviving anyway." The room was quiet for a long moment. I could hear my own breathing, slower now, steadier than it had been since I woke up strapped to that chair. "If this is true," the young one said carefully, testing the words as he spoke them, "then your resilience is not built from combat. It is built from simply refusing to stop, no matter how many times the world gives you a reason to." "That is a better way of putting it than I could have managed myself," I said. Vantor turned back around to face me. The stone hardness in his eyes had not disappeared entirely, but it had changed into something more like curiosity, the same kind of look he had given my scars in the beginning, except now it was aimed at understanding me instead of measuring me as a threat. "We came here believing we had captured a hardened enemy," he said. "A soldier shaped by countless battles, someone dangerous enough to require restraint and careful handling. Instead, we find a supply technician who fell off a roof and burned himself in a kitchen and ran into a clean glass door at a party." "When you say it like that," I said, "it does sound a little less impressive." "It does not sound less impressive," Vantor said, and something in his tone had shifted into a register I had not heard from him yet, something almost respectful. "It sounds like your entire species survives through sheer stubbornness rather than strength or skill. That may be a more dangerous trait than the one we feared." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing, and let the silence settle in the room instead. The guard by the door finally released a long breath, the kind of breath that comes after tension has drained out of a body all at once. Vantor gestured, and the restraint on my other wrist clicked open. "You are not what we believed you to be," he said. "Our error nearly cost you your life. For that, you have my apology." "I would rather have an apology than the alternative," I said, rubbing the feeling back into my freed wrist, "though I would also appreciate knowing what happens next, since I am fairly certain I am still very far from home." "You will be returned," Vantor said, "under different terms than you arrived. We do not release prisoners easily, but we do not hold ordinary travelers who have done us no harm either." The younger alien stepped closer, studying my arm again, this time without any trace of alarm in his posture. "The mark from the disease," he said. "You said almost every child on your world carries one like it." "Nearly all of us," I said. "That seems like a strange thing for a species to accept so easily. An illness that leaves permanent marks on nearly every young member of your population." "We do not accept it easily," I said. "We simply live with it, the same way we live with falling off bicycles and roofs and running into glass doors. Living leaves marks. That is not something unique to my species, I imagine. It is something that happens to any creature that grows instead of standing still." Vantor considered that for a long moment, then nodded slowly, as if filing the thought away somewhere important. They walked me out of that room not long after, down a corridor lined with dim lights, past crew members who watched me with open curiosity now instead of fear. Word had apparently traveled fast. By the time we reached the landing bay where a small transport was waiting to carry me back toward the edge of the system, even the guards stationed along the way were sneaking glances at my arms, as if trying to spot which mark belonged to which forgotten childhood mistake. Vantor walked with me the final stretch, his hands folded behind his back, his pace unhurried now in a way it had not been earlier. "I will remember this," he said, as the transport door opened in front of us. "Not the mistake we made in capturing you. The lesson underneath it. Strength does not always look the way we expect it to look. Sometimes it looks like a person who falls constantly and simply refuses to stay down." "That is a decent way to put it," I said, stepping toward the transport. "Though next time your people find someone covered in unusual marks, you might consider asking a few questions before deciding they belong to a soldier." "A fair point," Vantor said, and for the first time since I had woken up in that chair, something close to warmth had crept into his voice. "Safe travels, Ethan Hall." The transport door closed behind me, and I sat back in the seat, finally letting my shoulders drop. finally letting the tension of the last several hours drain out of my body all at once. Outside the small window, the stars stretched out in every direction, endless and quiet, and I thought about how strange it was that a childhood spent falling off bicycles and burning toast and running into glass doors had somehow become the thing that saved my life. I thought about my mother picking gravel out of my arm with tweezers while I cried in the kitchen. I thought about my grandmother's shed roof and the gutter that caught me on the way down. I thought about my little sister waiting for a sandwich while I learned the hard way that stoves do not forgive carelessness. None of it had ever felt like anything worth remembering before that day. It had all just been ordinary living, the kind of thing everyone carries without ever thinking twice about it. But sitting in that transport, watching my home system grow larger in the window ahead, I understood something I had never quite understood before. Every mark on my skin told a story about a moment when I had kept going despite pain, despite fear, despite every reason to simply give up and stay still. None of those moments had felt brave at the time. They had felt like accidents, like mistakes, like the ordinary chaos of growing up. But maybe that was exactly the point. Maybe the truest kind of strength was never the kind you trained for on purpose. Maybe it was simply the habit, built one scraped knee and one burned hand at a time, of always getting back up. The transport carried me the rest of the way home in silence, and for the first time in a very long day, I finally let myself relax.